Hey, it's the real you calling. Welcome home.
What would your life look like if you stopped second guessing yourself, stopped playing small, and finally broke free from the cycles that have kept you stuck? Well, that's what the Ignite Momentum Practicum is all about. It's a 6 week transformational coaching experience designed to help you break through people pleasing, self doubt, and codependency once and for all. And here's the best part, you get to choose your path. You can matriculate through the one on one accelerator. It's private, high touch coaching, you and me one on one. Weekly breakthrough calls, a custom action plan, deep mindset work, and real time support to help you reclaim your power and rebuild your confidence. Option two is the group intensive. This is where transformation meets community. Weekly live sessions with a cohort of like-minded individuals, hot seat coaching, Q&A, bonus trainings, and a space where you're truly seen and supported without judgment. So, whether you want personalized guidance or collective energy, the Ignite Momentum Practicum gives you the tools, structure, and support to stop circling the same patterns and start building unstoppable momentum. Ready to take the next step? Schedule your momentum call now at ignitingmomentum.co. That's ignitingmomentum.co. You'll find all the details there. You're not here to shrink, you're here to rise. Welcome back to Rising from the Shadows. I am your host, Marlon Wesh, and today I'm thrilled to bring you another conversation with my guest, Dr. Christine Cocchiola. Dr. Cocchiola is a recognized expert on the experiences of adult and child victims of coercive control. She's a college professor of social work, and she earned her doctorate in clinical social work at the very prestigious New York University, where she was mentored by Dr. Evan Stark, a leading authority on coercive control. Dr. Cocchiola presents internationally on the dynamics of coercive control. She's educating professionals, advocates, and protective parents about the lived experiences of children and the most effective intervention strategies for both adult and children victims, or child victims rather, suffering abuse. Dr. Cocchiola, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very nice introduction.
My pleasure. On the homepage of your website, you say that you have been doing this work since the age of 19, yet that you didn't know it was happening to you and that it took you so many attempts to escape. Course of control um, it makes it that difficult to escape, and the underpinning of all abuse is really that. Um, can you share a little bit of your story with us and your journey from survivor to now educator?
Sure. So I think it's really I think that's the tricky part, right? I've been educating since the age of 19,
I see.
yet I didn't even know it was happening to me.
Mm.
So, what we know about coercive control, and a lot of people have this perhaps incorrect, is a lot of people call it hidden abuse, and it's not. What it is that every abuser uses the same strategies. They don't just come into a room and start punching someone or threatening someone. Abusers start off grooming their victims. And the way to groom someone is to use psychological tactics to mirror someone, right? Like you meet abusers tend to find, I call my podcast is called Perfect Prey, because they tend to find people who are giving and optimistic and work hard, highly agreeable, often conscientious, really take things seriously in life.
Mm.
And so, I'm going to be a good mother. I'm going to be a good employee. I'm going to be a good student. And so an abuser is going to be drawn towards that because abusers want to mirror that. And so I think what people need to realize, and I see coercive control as the underpinning, as you said, of all abuse. I mean, think about, where does racism come from? Where does
Right.
sexism come from? It's about people wanting to exert power and control over another person or another group of people. Why? For power, to prove we're better, to have more money, to have more fame. It's a variety, we see this in business, in the
Hmm.
business world.
Hmm.
We see it anywhere there's a hierarchy of power. I work particularly with victims, survivors who are dealing with the family court. Judges think they have more power than anyone. Lawyers think they have more power than anyone. They diminish and dismiss people. So I see coercive control as working in the micro level in intimate relationships, in the meso level, in the systems that we all deal with, whether you go to the doctor and the doctor says you have this diagnosis and you never question it, instead of saying, wait a minute, let me get a second opinion. Let me see what other information is out there. And then from there, and that's just an example,
Hmm.
right? The schools, academics,
Yeah.
all these kinds of things. And then in the macro system, in our policies that really impact our most vulnerable. And, I talk about this in my TEDx. 35% of women suffer violence in their lifetime. That's violence.
Hmm.
But what of all the people who are suffering the psychological tactics of abuse, where an abuser never actually is physically violent,
Yeah.
maybe until they are,
Yeah.
right? And then what of the children living in those situations? And if you've listened to my TEDx, one of the things I talk about is that women of color, this is the number one killer
Yeah.
for women of color. How are we not discussing this?
Yeah.
It's like I just got goosebumps because it's so mind blowing to me that 1 in 3 women will suffer this. We know so many women have children, those are suffering. And then, as Bell Hooks always said, is that if we don't highlight that this oppression is impacting our most vulnerable children, women of color, then we're missing this entirely. So my story, which was your question, is that I began this work because someone I love had been abused as a child, couldn't believe children would ever suffer abuse, worked in child welfare, brought children to visit their abusive parents in prison because that's what I was required to do.
Hmm.
And why is it that when someone abuses a child or murders a parent, that we expect children, we tell victims all the time to leave, yet we expect children to retain relationships with abusive parents?
Yeah.
And so did this work my entire life, met my partner when I was 16, fell in love, all of the wonderful signs of that you expect in immature love, but also that you expect in a grooming process.
Sure.
It's similar. And married him, had children with him, and never knew that he was stalking me for years, that, and never understood the mockery in the home, the counter parenting, the diminishing, until I did. And my children were 17 and 19 when they disclosed to me that the indoctrination of me as an unstable parent, needing my medication, having mental health issues,
Ooh.
all of that started when they were 9 and 10. It's like a cult. That's all I can say. I mean, it's like a cult, and abusers groom their victims very much like cult leaders do. So,
So let's pause right there because some of
yeah.
that, I mean, that is heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. So much of that resonates. I actually did grow up in a cult, so I see the parallels so clearly. You mentioned that abusers, they groom their victims, and it would 100% true. And what I've also come to realize, they groom their enablers as well.
Oh, absolutely.
What you said about um, indoctrinating your children about your mental health and stuff like that, or like, oh my god, like it's so interesting to me that that is a tactic, especially for an individual that takes their mental health seriously, right? You can't
Yes,
see her because
yes.
she's in her crate right now because she knocked out my microphone my last interview. But I have a companion dog, and I have always been a very vocal about mental health. I'm an advocate for it. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. You know, supposedly a ultra machismo type of role, and so it's important for me to talk very candidly and vulnerably about things that most people don't expect someone that looks like me, the black man that works out, that was a veteran, and blah blah blah, and talking about matters of the heart. Very important. And to hear those same things like weaponized and saying like, "Oh, I'm worried about you. You have a dog. You have a psych dog. You have a this," and it's like, isn't that a good thing that I take my medicine? Isn't that a good thing I
Mhm.
go to therapy? Isn't that a good thing? Like those are um, symptoms of somebody that's responsible and taking care of their health, just like you would if you needed to go to physical therapy, right? Um,
Oh, God.
and how long that this goes on before, and then what you said about you didn't realize until you did realize it, and now I'm realizing it as well. It's like, oh, that's what this was. That's what this was. This is this um, pseudo concern shown, but it really is to establish a narrative that you're unstable, you're unwell, and so this is not a me problem. Um,
No, I love that you said all that because I think there's a couple of things. Men who are share their vulnerabilities, such as yourself, are unfortunately also suffering in the stratosphere, right? There is a stigmatization that if you're a vulnerable man, and the reality is we need more men to be vulnerable, to be able to share this in a way that makes other men comfortable. I mean, that's why, people say you always talk about women being victims. Well, because they're victimized more, and
sure.
because they're usually the parents of children, they're usually the caretakers of children, and these children sadly are suffering. But the reality is that we need more support for men also, that they can actually, like, why do we have this machismo effect,
Hmm.
right? And how harmful that is to, I always say it's harmful to boys and girls, men and women,
Hmm.
and anybody who doesn't identify, of course, along the binary, but how harmful it is. And I appreciate, you saying, because I think I want to like just make sure that the listeners understand coercive control is the underpinning of it all,
Hmm.
and it's a trajectory. Not all abusers, so I always say the savviest abusers know enough never to hit anyone.
Right.
Oh, they
Right.
know enough never to, because they're not going to lose their job or their image or whatever. So the psychological tactics are how it all starts. And sometimes these psychological tactics, by the way, think about child sexual predators. They're all
Yeah.
using grooming tactics.
Yes.
It feels good to the child. It feels good to the victim. And so then the tactics, there's like an opportunity that I'm going to go in and I'm going to like obtain control
Mhm.
by these wonderful qualities. And then I'm going to maintain it. And I'm going to gaslight and I'm going
Mhm.
to intimidate slowly. And the more that you pull away, I'm going to intimidate more
Yeah.
and I'm going to isolate more.
Yeah.
And then if you decide to leave, as you said, I said escape is elusive on my website. If you decide to try to escape, oh man,
Yeah.
now I'm going to come at you. And this is
Yeah.
when we see murders happening. This
Yeah.
is when we see children harmed. Is the trajectory goes from psychological to always financial. Then there'll
Mhm.
be legal if you're involved in the court
Mhm.
system. There'll be weaponization of children. And as Jane Mockton Smith talks about in her homicide timeline, then there's homicide,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if they need to pull that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's, it's we could have we could have an entire conversation on cross sectionality, right? And how the way specifically, let's talk about Western society, how it raises, people that identify as boys and girls differently, and how power is used differently depending on how you identify, right? Like you talked about murder rates, and that is predominantly women victims of domestic violence. Like murder is a reality at the hands of their male perpetrators, right? Um, but that's not so on the flip side, right? And but that's not to say that course of control is not used in it. So I think it's so interesting how you called it the underpinning of abuse, because for me, I grew up very physically brutalized by my family of origin, and suffered sexual trauma from family member as well. And so my adult uh, uh, abuser is not going to put their hand on me, because that's such a clear line that's drawn that this bad, right? Like,
Mhm.
but anything above that, when you're when your threshold for abuse is like so high, you think anything
Yeah,
that is not that is just like relational problems, right? Um,
100%.
so let's get into that because also on your website, you stated that coercive control can be so insidious. You said physical violence is not the defining characteristic, it's a pattern of coercion and control. Abusers do not show up with signs saying, I'm an abuser. And in the beginning of my journey from healing from narcissistic abuse, it felt so important for me to identify what was happening to me. And when my therapist identified that my former partner's behavior as textbook coercive control and narcissism, I felt relief in finally knowing. So, can you define for us what is coercive control and how, in your experience, does it impact adults and children victims? If this podcast speaks to you, if you're on the path of healing, reclaiming your voice, or just trying to piece together who you really are after surviving the unthinkable, I want to invite you into a space where you don't have to do it alone. Join our Facebook group created for survivors, cycle breakers, and people rebuilding themselves from the inside out. In there, we go deeper. Weekly prompts, live streams, raw conversations, and a whole lot of people who just get it. No pretending, no pressure, just truth, growth, and community. Search Rising from the Shadows, The Path to Reclaiming You on Facebook, or hit the link in the show notes to join the community. If this podcast speaks to you, if you're on the path of healing, reclaiming your voice, or just trying to piece together who you really are after surviving the unthinkable, I want to invite you into a space where you don't have to do it alone. Join our Facebook group created for survivors, cycle breakers, and people rebuilding themselves from the inside out. In there, we go deeper. Weekly prompts, live streams, raw conversations, and a whole lot of people who just get it. No pretending, no pressure, just truth, growth, and community. Search Rising from the Shadows, The Path to Reclaiming You on Facebook, or hit the link in the show notes to join the community.
Yeah, so coercive control is a pattern of behavior, a multifaceted strategic pattern. These people are very strategic uh, to exert power and control over another person. And so, again, like when I talked a little bit about how there's the beginning stage and it often feels good, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create opportunity for me to push your boundaries if I'm an abuser so that your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm,
So your voice gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I strip you of your agency. Dr. Evan Stark used to call it, when he was around, God bless his soul, a liberty crime. It takes away someone's freedom. Isn't it interesting that I was teaching every single semester on the power and control wheel by the Duluth model, the accredited model, post separation abuse model? Every
mm,
single semester I'm looking up at the whiteboard teaching on it, yet I didn't realize it was me. Because why? Back in the 90s and 80s, people were taught to look through the violent incident model whenever they thought of
mm,
abuse. And so we don't even have child welfare agencies that are really determining psychological abuse of children, when actually that's the beginning stage of
sure.
abuse. So unfortunately, people often conflate psychological abuse with coercive control. And the reality is, again, it's the underpinning of it all. And abusers use various tactics, multifaceted strategic tactics, to gain control over another person. And I would say that, again, a diminishing of autonomy. For me, one of the number one red flags is when someone uses a vulnerability against you.
Mhm.
Something you shared with them, they bring up in an argument, or you tell them you're on medication. They're like, maybe you need your meds, right? Like, those are the types of things. Mockery is huge. Abusers like to mock us and then say it's humor,
Mhm.
and then say we're too sensitive,
Mhm.
right? Of course, gaslighting. So as soon as a victim begins to question their reality, because gaslighting is different than lying, right?
Right.
And so understanding that someone might lie to you, you catch them, they say, oh, you caught me, right? Gaslighting is now they've deflected the conversation, right? So arguments become, you're confused when you leave an argument, right? Um, intimidation can look very overt. It can be like blocking someone physically, but
Mhm.
it also can be, listen, I know that if I leave this person, escape, man, things are going to get worse for me. Why do victims always go back? We know that there's a pattern of victims leaving, escaping, then going back, escaping, then going
Mm-hmm.
back. Did you know the number one time that a victim's life is at risk is the moment she files a restraining order?
Wow.
We tell victims all of the time. 1/5 of women in a study out of California, done by some really phenomenal researchers, Vites and Sorensen, found that 1/5 of them were murdered within 2 days of getting a restraining order.
Jesus.
So we tell victims to leave all the time, and we ask them why they haven't left. And then we of course force their children with these abusers, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. But then they're at risk and they know this. Like we know when you're living in this situation, you know what would happen if you disclosed you had an abuser in the
Yeah.
family system. The adults all align. Sometimes they're afraid of that abuser, or they can't believe it's true, or they're getting, I mean, I used to work in child welfare, and I can't tell you, and there's a research out recently that says the number one perpetrator of child abuse is a stepfather.
Yeah.
And the number one perpetrator of sexual abuse, by the way, is a biological father. So so what do we know? That if I'm a single mother and I'm in the child welfare system because I'm living in poverty and I don't have access to resources, doesn't mean I'm a bad mother, but maybe I have some substance use or mental health issues, I am probably seeking a partner to help me financially.
Yeah.
And I also have low self-worth, and I think I need a partner to fulfill me. And a partner will seek me out.
Yeah.
I am perfect prey, particularly if I have children and I am a sexual predator. So there's just so many layers to this that cause us to really, if we could just see the red flags and recognize, you asked what happens to children. I mean, it's just, even if I'm living in a home where my father or mother is beating on my father and mother, right? Like whatever that situation is, I don't have to be witnessing it.
Yeah.
I am always experiencing it in my body. I know it's unsafe. And I do want to talk just for a moment about narcissism and coercive control. So I like to use narcissistic abuse, right, versus NPD, narcissistic personality disorder.
Uh-huh.
I just think that these people have the character traits of what we know to be narcissism, but not all narcissists are this abusive, right? Like
Yeah.
they might be pains, they might be grandiose. Everybody in the room knows, oh my God, here they come again,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, but the reality is that not everybody is an abuser, and but that all narcissists, as Dr. Ramani and I discussed, so not all narcissists are coercive controllers, but all coercive controllers are narcissistic
Narcissist. Yeah.
abusers.
Yeah. I heard that quote.
Yeah.
No.
So
Wow. Wow. Um, I'm definitely having experiencing like a physiological reaction right now because everything like the process of gaining control and what I say is even if you're no longer in that relationship or in the physical presence or what have you, this is so insidious that it finds ways that you continue to abuse yourself on their behalf when they're no longer necessarily able to do that. Um, One of the unfortunate realities of surviving coercive control, whether it's in the form of, personality disorder, like narcissism or otherwise, is you quickly acquire PhD level knowledge of the tactics of these individuals. I remember being in a meeting with my abuser and I'm having my notepad and I just put the initials there and I was able to tick off every single one in Darvo. Um, Tell me, why is it one, could you share what Darvo is and why do all coercive controllers seem to use it as if they graduated from the same become an abuser university?
yeah. Yeah, so DARVO is a term that actually was created by Dr. Jennifer Fried back in 1997. A lot of people don't realize it's been around for a long
Mm.
time. She was researching victims of sexual abuse, and she kept finding, and that's also when she created the terms betrayal blindness and betrayal trauma. Because what she found is that often when a child or an adult came forward after being sexually abused, the abuser would deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. And then, of course, what would happen is that a child would readily be silenced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes these would be caretakers. I mean, I saw this along in my own work when I worked for the child welfare agencies, where, this was the person supporting the family system and they were helping to pay the rent. And now, if a child discloses, we've lost monetary assets to actually be able to not be homeless.
Yeah.
I mean, you could imagine the threat is real. It's an imminent threat, whether it's overtly said or covertly understood, right? And so she did research and she saw that this just continues to happen. And she then spoke out openly about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case
Mm.
because anybody who's listening, I was one of 10 people who was on her amicus brief for her appeal. And the reason for that is because I knew immediately it was an example of coercive control. And whatever people heard out there, I'd like them to now delve a little deeper if they're interested. If you're sitting here listening, you're like, Amber Heard was guilty. She was crazy. You have to understand there was a lot of social media promotion
Yeah.
to create a narrative that was false and to act, bots were created online. And there was a lot of information that is not accurate. And but what we know again is that very powerful people have the ability to do this very readily. Harvey Weinstein did it,
Mm-hmm.
obviously Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you know, Jeffrey Epstein's case was originally, I think, in Arizona, where he had young people who had come forward, and what they did is they kept postponing. The governor of Arizona apparently assisted in postponing his trial in Arizona so the young girls would get older.
Oh, Jesus.
So this is that's coercive control.
Yeah.
That is like exerting power and control over others to gain what you want, to create your narrative. I see that as a macro system coercive control. So anyway, to your point, I think that these these people are really adept at what they do, and Dr. Jennifer Fried saw that and saw that, and we talk about this often. Every single perpetrator, none, the accusation is their confession. The moment you hear
Yeah.
an you're cheating on me.
Mm-hmm.
You're stalking me. The moment someone hears that, they should immediately say, "Oh my God, he or she is cheating on me.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he or she is stalking me."
Mm-hmm.
Because that is how they roll. They become the victim and they take on the victim status, and then they do a really great job performing in public spheres,
Yeah.
usually, right? They go to court, they might be the moneyed parent. They're able to pay for the best attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
Attorneys choose who pays them. People ask me all the time, who's a good attorney for me? I'm like, I don't recommend attorneys because I've seen attorneys play both sides. They will play really well for a perpetrator, and they will play really well if the victim has money for the victim. They don't, they're not, it's not integrity based.
Yeah.
It's money based. So yeah, so that's quite a lot there. But anyway, betrayal trauma is when we've been betrayed over and over again, and then the system betrays us.
Mm-hmm.
How come people often say to me, how come child victims, um, we can't? Or, well, because you have to go on the stand and face your perpetrator usually.
Yeah.
And usually these cases are a couple of years out, and there's intimidation tactics used. And so what happens with perpetrators, we know that less than 3% of child sexual predators are arrested, convicted, and imprisoned. Why? And about 93% of them are known to the child. Why? Because what child is going to be able to testify? And then we used to say, how do you determine if a child's been sexually abused? Well, there's physical evidence. Well, if you bite the inside of your cheek, how quickly does it heal?
Right.
So if I tell you on Sunday that last Sunday I was harmed, the evidence is gone.
Right.
Doctors were saying children lie.
Yeah.
So and so then what do children learn and adults learn? They learn to be blind it's betrayal blindness. I'm
Yeah.
just going to be blind to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can say, I have been in some form of therapeutic care since I was probably 18, 19 years old. And so it, this fear isn't new to me. And I can sit here and say that if I wasn't as much of a voracious journaler as I am, I think I could have been convinced that these things didn't happen to me. I'm
Wow.
38 years old. I think I could have been convinced. Like, damn, if everybody is looking at me like crazy, like maybe I am imagining this. Like,
Mm.
I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back and like, oh yeah, no, October 14th. Because it's like you said, institutions and everyone. The other day I
Right.
heard a phrase used to describe coercive control as the slow erosion of freedoms and autonomy, and that certainly resonated with me. In my case, it was really the gradual mounting requirements,
Hmm.
where the goalposts just kept moving and kept me increasingly, surveilled or too anxious or depressed to figure out what was happening to me. Can you give an example of this like slow erosion and why it's so effective?
Yeah, and I want to point out something else that I think you hit on that I think is really important. So Biderman's coercion chart, Biderman researched people in 1957 during the Korean War under communist regime.
Mm.
He researched military men who were prisoners of war, over 4,000.
Wow.
And what he found was that there was a slow eroding of their ability to see clearly what they did and didn't do. So imagine being a prisoner of war, being accused of having secrets or whatever, and you go into prison and you're like, I did not do that. Absolutely not. And what happens is slowly over time, it's exactly what you were just talking about. You go from knowing this happened, for in your case, knowing this happened, to all of a sudden actually not being sure it happened. And so, in the case of the prisoners of war, what he was able to demonstrate is that over and over and over again, these strong, strapping men, as you know, right?
Hmm.
Military men, we have this idea in our head that they would go from totally denying sharing military secrets to totally admitting to it and actually believing it.
Mm.
And it's a progression that takes time. And the way to take time is to do exactly what you said, to create goalposts and then move them slowly further and further out, to give someone something. So for you, a lot of the times, maybe the goalposts were being moved out. For some people, it's like for a prisoner of war, giving them a blanket tonight,
Mm.
giving them maybe a mat, a pillow, instead of them sleeping on a concrete floor, giving them a piece of bread. All of a sudden, the prison guard is no longer the enemy,
Yeah.
but actually becomes someone. Ooh, and when we think about, in particular, child sexual people assume the child sexual abuse always feels bad. They don't
Right.
understand that we are all sexual beings
That's the
and that
part of the
sometimes
confusion. Like, why does this feel good? This is bad. I'm confused.
ex-
Yeah.
exactly. And then never mind that if you're a child who isn't getting affection or attention
Yeah.
from anyone else in your life, there is a human need for maybe not the sexual part, but the other parts, right? And this person feels like there's someone that you can become attached to.
Hmm.
So, it's really all related to what the goal of my particular work is based on attachment. And so when you think about those prisoners of war, over time they became more and more attached, not a healthy attachment, but
Hmm.
more and more attached to this person, right? Or to these prison guards, and eventually then say, "Yes, I did do it. You're right. I did steal military secrets. You're right. I did do all these bad things." And what happens with victims and survivors, if you've ever been entangled in a fight with a narcissist, a narcissistic abuser, eventually you just like, sure, yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
right. I cheated on you. Or I could see why you think that's cheating when actually I just went to lunch with a coworker. Okay. And you know this coworker. And we've been out to dinner with this coworker and his wife multiple. Like, in other words, we just acquiesce.
Yeah. You get
And
worn
this is
down.
what, oh, worn down. and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And then add in that abusers sometimes don't let victims sleep. Add in that they
Yes.
might be overtly abusing. They might actually be physically
Yeah.
violent. They might be sexually violent. They might be saying out loud, if you don't do this, I'm going to take away your children or you're going to lose your finances. Add in that victims are dependent in so many ways, because if I've made your world smaller and smaller and smaller, who is your only person now?
Mm-hmm.
Me, the
Mm-hmm.
abuser.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken away your family, your friends, your coworkers, whatever. And again, in my case, I was pretty lucky because I still held on to my work as a place where I felt so fulfilled.
Mm.
And he wasn't able to take that away. And frankly, I don't think he wanted to, because for him, it was like a little bit of a, my wife's teaches at a college, it was like a little
Yes.
bit of a status thing to him,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. If you're listening to this and you've got a story to tell, whether it's your personal story of healing and reclaiming your voice or rising from rock bottom, or you're a professional with powerful insight into trauma, identity, resilience, or transformation, then I want to hear from you. Rising from the Shadows is more than just a podcast. It's a space where truth is honored, power is reclaimed, and stories heal. If you have something to share that could empower others to stop shrinking and start rising, I'd love for you to apply to be a guest on the show. Just head to tellmystory.risingfromtheshadows.com to submit your application. Let's rise together, one voice, one breakthrough, one story at a time. If you're listening to this and you've got a story to tell, whether it's your personal story of healing and reclaiming your voice or rising from rock bottom, or you're a professional with powerful insight into trauma, identity, resilience, or transformation, then I want to hear from you. Rising from the Shadows is more than just a podcast. It's a space where truth is honored, power is reclaimed, and stories heal. If you have something to share that could empower others to stop shrinking and start rising, I'd love for you to apply to be a guest on the show. Just head to tellmystory.risingfromtheshadows.com.
It's a slow eroding away of, as so I love Dr. Evan Stark's most, for me, my favorite quote that I use often is, coercive control is like carpenter ants devouring the foundation of a house. You don't even know it's happening
Mhm.
until it's too late. Yet would we say to our neighbor, if their house collapsed due to carpenter ants, would we say, how come you didn't leave?
Right,
We would never say that.
right, right.
We would say, holy crap, I can't believe that happened to you. Yet we do this all the time with victims.
You said something so interesting in the example of the POWs in the Korean War, about, like, and then the guard might give them a piece of bread or a mattress, and so they created this dynamic where it's like this person that is torturing me is also being kind to me.
Mhm.
And is essentially, I think, what a lot of people, the phrase they use is, like, the love bombing and then the abuse to love bombing. I never was comfortable in stating that I was love bombed. And again, I think it goes back to kind of like these gender roles we typically have, right? Like when we think of love bombing, it's like, I'm flying you out to Paris after the first date and you're getting all these gifts. I got you Louis Vuittons and Chanel and blah, 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 blah. And I'm a guy. I'm a heterosexual guy that, like, that's not typically your woman doesn't typically do things like that for you. And I heard another phrase that I was like, oh, and before that, I should say that I felt that I love bombed because of that, what you were saying about if a child didn't grow up with that attachment and they feel it's like this is a person that they can attach to. So I know for a fact that I pushed the relationship way too fast. Um, Albeit I maintained in my affection, I maintained, like, none of that stopped. But I know that my trauma made me push for something that should have taken a more time. So I never identified that period of time as love bombing at all. But a phrase
Yeah.
that I heard a few weeks ago, and I was like, "That's it," was manipulative kindness. And I
Mm.
felt that it's like, oh, that is way more accurate because
Mhm.
coming from my background, I just only needed something a little bit better than what my family of origin did. I just needed you to like not hit me and think like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you," right? And
Right.
that was like enough for me to be like, "This is a good person." That they finally see someone sees that I was harmed by these people that were supposed to love me, and that was like sad to say enough for me. Um, and so that story about the POWs, I'm like, that's the perfect fit. It's manipulative kindness,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
just resonates so much.
Yeah, no,
And
I appreciate you saying that. And I also, of course, I mean, I'm so sorry you experienced what you experienced, but I really appreciate the fact that you're speaking out because we do, again, need more, meaning more men to express this. I think, I think what you're really talking about, by the way, is anxious attachment, which
yes,
is when, right? Like when we are so our standards are low sometimes or very high, but because of that we are having a hard time connecting to people in a way that's authentically ourselves.
hmm
Who are you at your core, and who are you good enough? And when we've been abused for a long period of time, for any period of time, children learn to devalue themselves.
right.
They don't feel like they add value to the world. And that can manifest in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is to be anxiously attached, right? To,
hmm
oh my gosh. And it almost, for some, can come across as like that borderline tendency where it's like,
Yes,
don't leave me, or I love you so much, I love you so much. And so I really appreciate you being vulnerable about that because I think that that is a trait that many people, what we know about in the clinical world is that subjugation is something that many victims and survivors have. And that is this idea to people please to ensure that no one feels rejected by us.
hmm
And on the other hand, also, we don't want to be rejected by them.
yeah,
So it can go two ways, right? And so this is why when we think about like if you haven't ever taken or your listeners haven't taken the Big Five personality test, we have research that affirms that the traits of many victims are highly agreeable
yeah,
and highly conscientious. And so, you know, those are really wonderful traits. But now let's just add in that maybe you grew up in a world where you were always oppressed because of abuse, or you're a woman who is intended to be a caretaker, like
hmm
part of the norms of society because of patriarchy, right?
hmm
Or that there's an expectation that you accommodate everybody, and now put me in a relationship with a narcissistic abuser.
yeah,
Bingo,
yeah. Perfect storm.
bingo, right? Yes, it really is. And I think also, just to be clear, I think you're kind of talking about intermittent reinforcement, right? When we talk
Yes,
about that
yes,
manipulative kindness, right? Like, I'm going to give you a little bit. And every time I give you that little bit, I can give you even less the next time,
yes,
and
yeah,
even less, and
yeah.
even less. And so I'm drawing you into my web, and that's how I retain control. And you don't need as much. I have people who get on the call and they're like, yeah, he's cheated 3 times, but he says he won't do it again. I'm like, how many times is too many times?
hmm hmm
you know or he hit me once. How many times is too many times?
Right.
He's called me bad names, but he hasn't done it in 2 months. Okay, but he has a pattern. And so that's really the key here.
hmm
If you're listening and you're wondering if you're in an abusive relationship, has there been a pattern? A pattern is one more than one.
Yeah.
A pattern of behavior where someone has attempted to diminish you in some way, to put you down, you, using your vulnerabilities against you. um, these are all
Yeah.
really significant red flags. Yeah.
I'm so glad you talk about patterns because, in my experience, an abuser will like to use the idea that you're bringing things up in the past, and they don't want to acknowledge that there's been a pattern. They want to treat each wrongdoing as an isolated incident because then there's plausible deniability. And I'm smiling right now because I'm just remembering arguments where I'm literally and this is like years before me like leaving, but and I'm literally saying like this conversation that I'm had, but I'm so attached, and trauma bonded that I'm not realizing like, wait, this is the time to like move. Where I kept saying like, you've got to zoom. Is what I said. You have to zoom out, and when you zoom out, you see the pattern. It's not just one thing. Um, um, and even then, it's like I was hoping that if I convinced them, then I would be convinced that I guess it was bad enough or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
we can't convince them, can we?
no, no,
No,
no.
it's like I always say, like once you're engaging in jading, justifying, arguing,
Hmm.
defending, or explaining yourself, and victims really do a great job of learning to explain themselves because that's what the abuser wants. That empowers them,
Yeah.
right? That's their oxygen, like literally let you go ahead and explain and justify,
Hmm.
and then what I'm going to do is twist it all on you.
Yeah.
So once you're doing that, you've lost. So
Right.
don't
Don't,
even do
yeah,
it,
don't
right?
interact. Um, you have uh, you have a heart-wrenching video on your TikTok, and you use Jenga to illustrate how a predatory parent covertly goes about to fracture the foundation of trust and safety that a child has with a safe parent. Um, I've seen this with my own eyes, with as simple as a tactic as, daddy must not be available to pick up the phone and talk to you,
Mhm.
despite being there less than 12 hours before, right? I'm very intentional now with my children to have conversations. I love talking to them during bath time. That's just kind of like an intimate time for me, where I'll be like, that daddy loves you so much, and I love talking to you. And if there's any a time where, I don't pick up the phone, where you're at mommy's, it's not because I don't want to talk to you. But for me to be the best dad for you, it's important that I rest and I have some me time. So I'm all energized for our shenanigans. That's how we put it. We do our shenanigans. Um, in your professional opinion, how can a parent safeguard that foundation of trust and safety that they've created with their children despite attempts to erode it?
Um, so I have several acronyms. One is the three P's. It is really important to your point. You said take the wide lens. I call it the 10,000-foot view. Predict that every time your child is with that abusive parent, they are hearing things that will erode away to fracture their attachment to you. I call it malicious fracturing of attachment. Just predict it's happening.
Mm,
It's happening. And then prepare yourself. So let's just say this weekend your kids are going off to their other parent's house and you just bought a new car. Just predict the other parent's going to talk about how you spent so much money, that that you don't have money for them, that you spent or that you bought a dumb car, or the color of the car is gross, or just predict that they are going to use something against you. Now, maybe you didn't do anything new this weekend. What are the normal things? I always say to protective parents, you know this abuser better than anyone.
mhm,
What are the things they know about you that they can say bad about you? What are the things that they already, they know about you? You're on medication, oh, your daddy always has to see a therapist. So now your kid's never going to see a therapist, right? Like predict it and then prepare. Because when your children, as they age, they're going to start coming home and actually accusing you of these things. That's what the abuser wants them to do. The
mm,
abuser wants them to coerce and control you because they become the weapon. They're weaponized. And so just prepare for it. And I always say, if your child's not doing it now, I'm so happy for you. But believe me, it can change on a dime, literally a dime. You may have a child they come home, they're so happy to see you. And then the next, like all of a sudden, they're like mad at you. And you're like, what the heck is going on? Nothing is personal. It is an indoctrination that's occurring in their brain. They are harmed by it. I always say, this too. If your child came home with a broken leg because they hurt themselves on the soccer field, you treat them differently. Just assume that every time they're coming home, their brain has been fractured again. There's a
mhm,
breaking down because if we think about how the brain works, especially when we're young, We're more in especially if we're harmed, we're in reptilian mode a lot. We're in the lower part of the brain. Where their connection to you is in the limbic section of the brain, and that connection with you is regulating them. It helps them feel safe. And then cognitive processing, that higher section where they understand, wait a minute, mommy or daddy's behaving. What's going on there? That's weird, right? That can't come unless there's regulation and connection. And regulation and connection can't happen unless we're out of the reptilian part.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've been made to feel all weekend that dad is unsafe and I come home to dad's house, I'm in reptilian mode.
Mm-hmm.
Just predict that.
Mm.
And now, how do you help them regulate? How do you create co-regulation with them? It may mean that you are not at the door waiting for them, depending on their age. It may mean that you give them some space. It may mean 24 hours of just calm, even if they did really horribly on a math test last week,
Mm-hmm.
even if they called you a horrible name last week. Calm. And then once we can get them to regulate, we can create connected experiences, and that will fire up the limbic system.
Mm.
And then if we can fire up the limbic system, then we can hope eventually they can cognitively process what's happening to them. So just assume they're coming home with broken brain.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Can't imagine a parent doing that to a child. It's like mind blowing that a parent would actually weaponize their child in this
mm,
way and hurt them in this way, but it's happening all of the
all the
time. I
time.
believe this is the number one, like, abuse of children, but the fact that we don't acknowledge that coercive control is occurring within family systems to everyone in the family system, including the children, I think this is the number one intergenerational trauma that's
Yes.
preventable
Oh yes.
because, I
Yeah.
mean, if we could keep children safe, they could regulate. If they could regulate, they actually could cognitively process. They wouldn't
Yes.
be engaging in
Yeah.
harmful self-harm and other harmful behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I think about everything that I've experienced, and I know it was because I wasn't safe to say no growing up, right? Things that I allowed, and I think about how I raise my children now, and they don't get in trouble with arguing for me. Like I want them to like critically think or feel like they have a voice. Do they get their way? No, but like the fact that you hush children and don't because I say so, it doesn't make sense. Like you're not setting them up for to be adults that can protect themselves. Um,
Mm.
you gave a speech where you say that these characterologically disordered individuals are drawn towards conflict because they're hell-bent on revenge. And then you go on to say how professionals fail to recognize coercive control by perpetrators, and they're simply labeling it as high conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Destructive chord, because that's been my experience as well. After leaving my abuser, I've endured an incessant campaign of harassment that has, to this day, despite documented evidence, gone dismissed by mediators, attorneys, therapists, family members, and more. I've interviewed over a dozen survivors of narcissistic abuse, coercive control, and I know that I'm not unique in this at all. How do survivors like myself and them fight against what you label as this institutional betrayal?
Mm. Yeah, and that's actually another word that Dr. Jennifer Fried came up with. She's just quite remarkable. Um, yeah, how do you? Well, you strategize the court system. I always say to my clients, just assume that no one has your best interests, a
Mm,
victim's best interest, or the children's best interest at hand. And what does that mean? That means that the more that you fight, typically, the more that you fight, the more you're going to lose. You unfortunately can be, and we see this a lot with women because you probably know that women are pathologized at a pretty high rate, right?
sure.
Like, she's emotional,
Yep,
she's
yep.
hysterical, she's got mental health problems, right? But in general, the system doesn't work to protect children. And so I would say that sometimes 50-50, is your best option. 50 shared parenting is your best option, because if you fight, unfortunately, all too often, victims and survivors, these perpetrators have usually more money, and certainly they get aggressive attorneys. So, when
Yeah.
when the typical person gets a divorce, they're just like looking for an attorney. They're just like, oh, they
Right.
don't realize they're walking into the den with the wolf, right? And so, you get a fair, decent attorney. You need a bulldog if you're going into these types of
Hmm.
situations. So that's what you need. And so an abusers typically get the bulldog.
Yeah.
And victims and survivors also are blindsided by it, because you go into these situations thinking it's going to be fair.
Right.
There's going to be justice.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to see the trail of
Sure,
emails
we
I've
didn't work
received that have
out,
been
but we both
harassing.
want the best thing for the kids, right?
Yeah, no, right. So I just think it's really important that you have you put on, it's people say, but you're telling me to acquiesce again to me sometimes. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. I'm telling you to have the ability to see what's in front of you now.
Hmm.
And if you don't see it and you keep fighting, it's going to get worse for you under most circumstances, not all circumstances. But I will tell you that I have mothers who have like pediatricians disclosing abuse to child welfare. And when they go to court, the abuser calls her an alienator and she loses custody. And I'm talking about actual physical evidence by a pediatrician. This is the world we're living in. Abusers have a lot of power in the system, and it's very scary. It's very scary. There's actually, and if we think, it's so funny, because if we think like you and I are having this really wonderful conversation to educate people because we care, we don't want children harmed. There's fathers' rights groups. It's called the Fathers' Rights War Room, where
Mm.
they actually are talking in a group on how to get custody from protective, safe parents.
Mm.
I mean, that's the world we're living in. It's really kind of sad.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember when I left, I would go on these Facebook groups and just looking for other single dads, going through the same thing. And when I tell you that I would leave in the exact same day that I was let into these groups, because I'm like, I'm not here to be like, oh, my bitch ex, wife, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm looking for emotional support in a very
right.
tough thing. And it's like, it's like we just cannot divorce the patriarchy from like despite like, and that's how it's like it hurts everyone, right? Like here I am,
Hurts
try
everyone.
it hurts everyone. um if there's one key lesson that you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
Oh God, I don't know if I could say one. I'll try though. I would say a couple of, I have to say maybe two. If you're in, ask yourself, does my body feel good in this relationship?
Yeah.
Because we fail, we lose our intuition in these relationships. And if that doesn't work, ask yourself, would I want my sister or would I want my mother to be in this relationship? Right?
Mhm.
So that's number one. And I think number two, if there's protective parents listening, you have so much influence. I created a protective parenting program because I wanted protective parents to have the therapeutic skills to help their children as they go between two homes,
Mhm.
as they're dealing with all of this. You probably know I co authored the book Framed Woman in the Family Court
Mhm.
Underworld, but I'm coming out with a new book. It's for children. It's called Every Moment of Every Day. And it's for children who don't want to go to the abuser. And if they're forced and they don't have a choice, how do we help them in their body regulate and understand that we are there for them every moment of
Yeah.
every day, even when we're away? Um, so protective parents have so much influence. You can do so much with the time you are with your children, even if they are coming home dysregulated. Know that they have broken brain, that they are suffering, that they are experiencing exactly what you
Yeah.
experienced. It might be more covert, but
Yeah.
they're experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. This conversation has been incredible, and I know our listeners are walking away with so much insight and inspiration. Where can listeners connect with you, learn about your work?
Sure, sure. I'm at coercive control consulting .com, or you can go to I Know Your Heart, because I believe protective parents know their children's hearts better than anybody. I know yourheart.com will get you there too. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, Dr. Cocchiola, Coercive Control. So,
And we'll
yeah.
put that all in the show notes so our listeners can have ready access to it. But thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom with us today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on another episode of Rising from the Shadows. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with someone you think would benefit from it. And if you can go on any platform that you listen to this podcast on, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating. I greatly appreciate that. And as always, remember that healing isn't the absence of shadows, it's learning to thrive in your own light. So rise today, rise tomorrow, and rise always, because the shadow doesn't stand a chance. Take care. If you're an event organizer, HR leader, or educator looking to bring a powerful voice to your stage, someone who speaks truth, ignites momentum, and empowers your audience to rise above what's held them back, then I want to talk to you. My keynote, Rising from the Shadows, is more than a talk. It's a transformative experience that shows people how to stop shrinking, start healing, and stand fully in their story. I've lived it, I teach it, I walk people through it. So if you're building a lineup of speakers who don't just talk but move people, head over to marlonwesh.com to create something unforgettable for your audience.